How's this? Is that better? I bet you guys can hear me now. It would be helpful to, thanks guys, turn off the mute button. I had muted myself as I entered the room. All right, let me share my screen and get to our presentation. This in slideshow mode here. All right, a couple of things before we get started. My name is Tony Frana. I am a member of the career coaching team here at FlexJobs. I'm also the team lead, and so we're really happy to kick off 2021 with all of you on this webinar for navigating the remote and flexible job market. I see some of you are saying hi from Barcelona, so good evening, I bet, to you, or early evening. Good afternoon and good morning to those of you who are out west as well. Yeah, 8 p.m. We've got some people from Texas, all different places. Oh, another Texas person. Very, very good. A couple, oh, Canada, great. I love seeing where everybody's from. So keep all of that coming in. We have a lot of people who registered today. I think we were over 1,100. And so it's always really fun to take a minute or two to say hi to everybody, make sure you can hear the presenter, and also give everybody, or give Zoom a bit of time to get folks into the room for the presentation. This webinar is going to last just under an hour. We'll be going through how to navigate the remote and flexible job market in 2021. We do have some time at the end for live questions from you. I would like to point out that using the Q&A box instead of the chat box for questions is really helpful. I'm the only one on my team here today, so I will get through as many questions as I can with this big group. I know some of you are going to have the same question as somebody else, so the Q&A box is really nice if you haven't used Zoom before, or if you have, you know that you can upvote or do a thumbs up on somebody else's question. That helps prioritize the questions that I can answer to make sure that I'm answering as many people's questions as I can, especially if they are repetitive. I will be asking you a few questions throughout the webinar to answer for me if you want, and you can do that in the chat box. And the chat box really is also a really great way or place for you to share your own tips and tricks that you may have tried and to interact with the other participants in the webinar. So you can use both. And if you put a question in the chat box and I see it, that's great. I'll try to answer it as well. But the Q&A is really the best place for those questions. Lastly, we are recording the webinar. Yes, I see that question. We are recording the webinar, and later this week or early next week, you will receive a link if you have registered, if you're here. Even if you can't make it or if you pop out early, you'll be able to get the recording sent to you as well as any additional resources that we talk about. For this particular webinar, the webinar is the resource, so you'll have that. FlexJobs also does a really good job of getting the webinar on the FlexJobs blog or on the website. And there will usually be a post or an announcement on our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So thank you guys for joining us. We are really excited, as I said, and I love seeing people from all over the world. It's such a joy for us on the coaching team to be able to help and work with so many people. So let's go ahead and talk about the topics we're going to be covering today. So I'm going to tell you just briefly about FlexJobs. We'll talk some about the trends in the remote and flexible job market, finding flexible companies and jobs, how you can do that, and then really sort of some action planning on how you can position yourself for flexible work. So by the end of this, at the end of the session, before we go into questions, I'll give you a sneak peek of the question I'm going to ask you is kind of what next steps are you planning on taking for your job search in 2021 after we go through all of this information? So keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through the following slides. Let's learn about FlexJobs. So some of you may or may not know that FlexJobs has been around since 2007. Since 2007, we have been helping people find flexible jobs faster, easier, and safer. So in that time, since 2007, we've helped almost 6 million job seekers, 5.7 million, and we have screened more than 57,000 companies that you have access to on our site in terms of what flexible and remote jobs they offer currently and what flexible and remote jobs they have offered previously. So it's really good to have that information. And really, FlexJobs removes the key pain point of finding those great remote and flexible jobs. A lot of times, it's typically harder and really time consuming to find these jobs anywhere else. So all of our jobs on our site are hand screened and verified to remove scams, commission-only jobs. There are no ads and other low-quality jobs on our site. We have 50 different career fields from entry level to executive. One of the things that makes us a little bit different from other job boards is that we are a membership site. So there is a membership fee to view all of the jobs and all of the information on our site. We do have a lot of free resources available to the public, to include the company database that we have, as well as the blog and over 4,000 articles and resources available for your job search. When you are a member of the site, you're able to view all of the jobs in their entirety, apply to them through FlexJobs or through the career page of the site. And you also have access to discounted career coaching services with my team, our team of 9 lovely coaches, where we offer career coaching, resume reviews, and bundle services to FlexJobs members at a discounted rate, where we can work with people individually throughout their job search. So that's a little bit about FlexJobs and our site and my team. So throughout the course of 2021, you'll see lovely members of our team bringing webinars to you to help find these flexible and remote jobs that you guys are looking for. All right. So without further ado, let's dive in and take a peek at the flexible job market. And just to make sure that we're really on the same page in terms of what the vocabulary, what the words mean, flexible job is really a catch-all phrase. That phrase captures things like a schedule. There are different schedules that can make a job flexible. It might be a full-time job, but the schedule might be an alternative schedule that you can work in the off hours. It might have a flexible schedule where you can split your day. I know a lot of us, if we're parents and we have kids that did online learning or are still doing online learning, a split flexible schedule maybe was something that really has worked or been kind of a lifesaver for those of us that have kids also doing remote learning, even technology-wise, for having those computers and additional resources to use in the home when everybody's there. Location can be flexible. The status, we have flexible jobs on our site that are employee roles. We also have flexible jobs on our site that are contract or freelance positions, and hours can be flexible. So if you're thinking about flexible work opportunities, it really is something that's outside of a 9-to-5 in-office role. So that's what we want to think about. One thing that we do like to point out as well and like to note is that side hustles are typically part-time, but they also could be an employee or a freelance role. So side hustles can be flexible as well. They can also be remote or on-site. So you kind of get the full gamut of all of those types of positions at on the FlexJobs site. All right, so what you need to ask yourself and consider as you're going through your 2021 job search is, what is your ideal flex? So think about what that would look like, because it's different for everybody. I've worked with clients who don't want to work remotely. They just want some flexibility, or they want to be freelance and have, you know, part-time hours. And so it really is different for everybody. There are a lot of iterations that you can see from all of these circles on here. You want to really sit down and think about what you'd ideally like. When I switched to remote or flexible work, rather, back in 2009, really, and a little bit before that, I was working from home every other Friday. But I moved, and I knew that I wanted to continue working, but I moved across the country and I found myself in a job search. And the way that my family life was, it was important for me to have a remote job. I needed to have remote job with flexible hours. And so when I framed my job search, those were two things that were not negotiable for me. And so if you can really think about this, and in the chat box, what do you think is your ideal flex? If you could design your dream job and the flexibility aspect of it, what would be your dream flex? And you can put that in the chat box and let's see what everybody is saying. Your dream flex, your ideal flex. Would it be as an employee, full-time but remote? Remote and full-time? Yes, Mary, remote, full-time employee. Lots of remotes, very good. Yep, all kinds of remote, flexible, 30 hours a week. And for some companies, 30 hours a week might actually be considered full-time. So you'll also see differences in employee hours and things like that in terms of part-time work. You might see a part-time job that has 5 hours. You might see a part-time job that has 30 or 35 hours per week. So this is really great. Flexible, full-time, or part-time. See, that's another iteration that you can have as well. All right, perfect. No travel. Yep, exactly. So all of these things are important to consider and brainstorm in terms of where you want to go with your job search in 2021. A lot of times, and I'll say this again in the presentation, but as you start your job search, it's really important to do this kind of front end work of researching, answering some questions, taking a deeper dive into some of these things so that you can be really prepared when you start looking at job postings and knowing what to apply for. Okay, so moving on to the top career fields for flexible jobs. This is based on our FlexJobs posting data and the jobs that are posted to our site. These fields are the fields that have the most flexible jobs posted, and we look at this regularly throughout the year and update it accordingly. But right now, these categories, computer, sales, project management, of course, medical and health, and even customer service right now with everything that happened in the pandemic, really have had a lot of job postings through the course of 2020 and into the new year. All right. Okay. So as you heard me read through some of your comments that you guys had on your ideal flex, I was not surprised that most of you said that you wanted remote work because that's a safe assumption, because when we survey people, 80% of professionals say that remote work is their preferred flexibility option. That comes over part-time, it comes over flexible scheduling, it comes over freelancing. People want the ability to work remotely from anywhere or even remotely from their home. And so these job titles here are the most common remote job titles. So if you're thinking about, your career field, what field you're in, these are some titles that we see most frequently with remote jobs. Tutor, again, project manager, which is also a category, analyst, sales, customer service representative. There are a lot of medical positions also that work really well in telehealth, medical coding. There are a lot of remote jobs available as well. All right. Our intent, and my intent in sharing this with you, is not for you to only see that these are the 20 remote job titles out there. There are so many more. Companies can call their positions really anything. Some companies get very creative with the names that they give their roles. But what you want to be doing as you're hearing these things is thinking about what your career field is, what your skill set is, and what types of job titles you might be looking for or interested in pursuing as a result of the ideal flex that you're looking for in 2021. All right, very good. Okay, so we've gone over job categories, the top job categories, the top remote job titles. And here is a list of top companies for flexible jobs. This is a sampling of some of the companies that you will see on our website if you go to our research companies page on the FlexJobs site. You can see from this slide that there are a variety of companies in different industries: communications, education, medical, um, technology companies. And you can also probably see that some of these companies like Amazon, you've probably heard of a lot, but there are some smaller companies as well. So you'll find companies of all different sizes in all different industries that offer flexible and remote jobs. And again, this is just a sampling. There will be many more different companies as well on our site. Incidentally, when you go to the FlexJobs site, and if you are searching for a company that you might like to work for or looking for their flexible work policy, you can search by category. So we've outlined the top 100 companies for flexible and remote work, but we've also categorized it by the job categories that we post jobs into, like accounting, computer, medical, and health, and technology, things like that. So you have a lot of different options there as you're going forward. All right, before we go into this next section, I saw some questions pop through. So let's just see if there's anything in regard to this that makes sense. Let's see. Somebody asked, we've screened 57,000 companies. How many have you approved? Well, we have that many, over 57,000 that have been approved and that have posted or had jobs on our site since we started in 2007. And I don't know the total number that we have researched. We have a great team of job and company researchers that go through that as well. Let's see. All right, I'm going to put that I answered that question, so that's done. It looks like that's kind of everything. What's the difference between remote and telecommute? Are they the same? We'll talk about this in a little bit, I guess, but essentially, yes, those are mostly interchangeable words for a job that is off-site. Now, telecommute might mean that you have the opportunity to work off-site, but you also have to telecommute into the office occasionally. All right, so we'll go ahead and get back to the presentation. All right, finding companies and jobs. So let's talk about how you can identify specific job listings and companies that hire for flexible jobs. So finding flexible job companies, you want to make sure that what you're doing is, of course, I've been talking about FlexJobs and the company guide that we have. Every year, we will update our top 100 remote job companies that will be coming out in early 2021 for this current year. But you can also go directly to company career pages and see what kind of verbiage or keywords you notice about work-life balance or flexible work sections or anything that might be in their mission or vision statement that talks about their flexible work policy. Sometimes it's not clear in job descriptions, but you will see things like that on the career pages. When you are looking to find flexible companies, you know, we'll talk about networking a bit in the next several slides, but think about former customers or even companies you've had contact with. When I was preparing for our presentation today, I was thinking about, you know, there's subscription boxes that you can get for any snacks, kids' toys, clothes, things like that. And there was a clothing company that I ordered some subscription boxes from, you know, right when they came out 5 or 7 years ago. And I was looking for a different remote job at the time. And I went right to that company's career page because I really liked the company. I liked the service they provided me. I felt like their customer service was really good. But just thinking about where you give your business to might lead you to some ideas in terms of companies that you might consider for your remote and flexible job search. Other business partners and you know, similar types of companies that you've worked for in the past. You know, you can think about, you know, what the space is like in that area to target specific companies and see, as part of your research, what their flexible and remote work policy is. You know, if you went to college or you are a member of any professional organizations, you know, usually you can go and network through them and you can see maybe where, you know, your best friend from college works or somebody that you connected with in a professional organization. These are things that can give you ideas. And the point of this is that when you are doing your research or starting your job search or looking to identify companies to target, there are no wrong answers. And so the more ideas that you have and the more brainstorming that you do, you will have more data to take you into the actual execution of your job search as you start applying for jobs. So hopefully that makes sense as you go through that. All right, let's flip the slide here. Okay, so we talked about finding flexible companies. Let's think about how we can find flexible job listings. So I've talked about FlexJobs, so I'm not going to talk any more about that. But there are also some smaller, more specialty job search sites that you might be able to identify additional job boards that would be helpful for you to your specifics of your search. Skill Crush has a list of the 25 best sites for finding remote work. Proven has a list of 100 job boards for job seekers that's situated and organized by industry. So I think that's a really nice way to organize things. If you're looking for freelance, if that's part of your ideal flex, you might want to try Ryan Robinson's list of 72 best freelance job websites to get that remote and freelance work. I'm going to mention your industry and professional associations again, as well as family, friends, and your professional network. One of the key things you can do in your job search is networking. And this goes through not only the beginning stages of your search where you're trying to identify jobs and where they are, companies that offer the type of flexible work that you're looking for, but also eventually when you start applying for jobs, if you know anybody that works at these specific companies. So the networking piece of it, you don't want to be quiet about your job search, particularly with those who are close in your personal circle, because the more people or the wider net that you can cast in terms of what it is you're looking for, the more people will be thinking of you when they hear of something from their network. And so it really is sort of expanding your reach, and it's a really important thing to do to accelerate your job search. So much so that there's a whole slide dedicated to networking. Now, in terms of the research component of your search, when you are talking to people in your network and you are trying to make sure that you are going to find your ideal flexible work arrangement, ask people that you know what it is they do and how they do it. I bet you since the pandemic started, we all know many more people who've worked remotely than we did when 2020 started, right? Because so many of us, if we hadn't worked remotely before, flipped on a dime and were able to start or were forced to start working remotely. And so please, think about people that you know already and talk to them about what it is they do and how they do it. Do they have a flexible schedule? What does remote work mean for that type of job? Does it have flexibility? Is there time that they have to go into the office? Did they find a side hustle or a second part-time job that they were able to do remotely and they really enjoy that? So these are the types of questions that you can ask and you should ask to expand your knowledge, to help inform your job search to the best of your ability. Because what do they say? They say, what, knowledge is power? Is that right? All right, let's see here. I want to make sure my slides are in the right order. Okay, so we go back to, here's that telecommute job word right here. When you're searching for remote jobs, if you've identified that you want remote to be part of your flexible work component, there are a few phrases that are going to be more beneficial to use than others. And it's interesting because historically phrases like work from home or work at home were used most often by job scammers. And we at FlexJobs encourage job seekers not to search with those phrases. What we saw through the course of the pandemic was more legitimate and very reputable companies started using work at home or work from home to advertise their remote work opportunities. And so I share this because not all work at home and work from home advertised verbiage in a job posting is a scam, but scammers still use those phrases. So with caution, proceed when you find a job that says work at home or work from home. The best jobs that you can use for remote searching is telecommute, virtual job, and remote job. And you'll notice if we go back to the question that somebody asked earlier, what's the difference between telecommute and remote job? You know, they're really interchangeable. Telecommute was kind of the top word that was used for remote jobs for a really long while. And now virtual and remote are used more and more. What you want to pay attention to if we think about the execution of your job search and applying for a specific job, if you are going to use the word to show that you have flexible or remote work experience, use the same word that's used in the job posting. So that will help with the applicant tracking systems. And we'll briefly get into that a little while later. But employers will use lots of phrases to describe their remote jobs. You can see distributed team, home-based, telework is another one that's listed. But the words in the orange on the left of the slide are probably the most helpful and beneficial to use to yield the best and the most results. Okay, so I have talked a little bit about scams very briefly. In a couple slides, well, in the previous slide. So scams are unfortunate, but a very real part of your flexible job search, especially for, work from home jobs. Unfortunately, in 2020, we saw an increase in the number of job scammers that were out there because people were taking advantage of the situation of COVID and the pandemic, which is really unfortunate. Here are some warning signs of scams. If you get contacted by somebody with a generic email or an email that's first name, last name at gmail.com or yahoo.com, that should be a red flag, because most people who are emailing from a place of employment, that place of employment is in the email ISP. If there's no job description or it's very vague, but yet ready to hire you right away without an interview, pay you money tomorrow, all of those things are scams, or indicative of something that deserves more research to make sure that it's not a scam. If they're contacting you through instant messenger or wanting to do instant messaging interviews, be careful there. Although, again, just like work from home and work at home started to be used by more reputable and legitimate companies in 2020, we've read some things across the career coaching team about hiring managers and recruiters doing some interviewing via text. They've had to get a little bit more creative on how to pre-screen applicants, and everything is done remotely. And so again, all of these things are red flags, kind of individually. If you see several of these, you definitely, could assume that it's likely a scam, but you want to do some more research, and we'll talk about how to do that. What we do know is that when we talk with clients or we talk to people who have experienced a job scam, they all say that at some point in the process, something just didn't add up or something just didn't feel right. And so really what you want to do is trust your instincts. And if something is a red flag, do some due diligence and do some more research. Employers will, interview you. They will, look. Sometimes employers do background checks, right? And so you can and should research the job opportunity, particularly if one or more of these warning signs of scams pop up, because you don't want to, fall into a scam that, it's just a really tough thing. All right. So if you feel like you've come across a scam, there are two easy ways to do more research. So number one is for any company or any job, open a new browser window and search the name of the company, like General Electric, and with the job title, and then say scam. So if you're doing a search on Google or Bing or whatever, if there are prominent scams that have been reported for that company and that job, it should pop up. And the second method is if you have seen a copycat website or a copycat scam, you can open a new browser, search the company name and with the word careers, so that you're sure that you're on the real career page, and compare that to the page that you were looking at in your other browser. I will tell you that I fell victim to a scam with Apple. And long story short, there were 2 web pages, and the scammer who I was on the phone with showed me the Apple support page, which looked identical to the Apple support page. That there was probably one period or one hyper or forward or backward slash that was different. And so scammers are very good at scamming, unfortunately. So just do your research, be mindful of the warning signs to move forward as you go. All right. So now that we've talked about how to find the jobs, find the companies, how to do some of that research, what are some things that you can do to position yourself for flexible jobs? The first thing you want to do, again, this goes back to the research and really taking a deep dive into the skills that you already have that would be beneficial for a remote or flexible employer. So think about these skills. These are some of the most common skills when we survey employers that they look for in a remote or flexible employee. So written and verbal communication. When you don't work face-to-face with somebody, and even if you are working at a flexible schedule with an alternative schedule, some of your counterparts might work in the evening while you work during the day, you may not even have the opportunity to communicate verbally. It all will be in written communication. So what is your tone? What is your style? Do you have a good, strong, proficient written and verbal communication skill set? So you really want to make sure that you highlight those skills on your resume. Time and task management and your ability to focus, because you don't have, it's really hard to micromanage when you're working remotely, because someone's not going to walk by your cubicle or whatever, your office, and knock on the door to say, hey, do you have that thing that's due at 3 o'clock or for the meeting? Remote and flexible employers want to know that you are proactive, that you'll ask questions to make things more clear, that you'll speak up, so that you have a good understanding of the expectations, not just for the job itself, but the expectations of actually executing the job when you're in it. You want to show your comfort with technology and troubleshooting. So as I started the webinar, those of you who are here right away, no one could hear me. I panicked a little. I don't know if you could tell. I was on mute, but what will you do? I live in Florida. I've got clients all over the world. Sometimes Florida has really bad thunderstorms and technology goes out, but that doesn't mean that has happened where my client lives. And so how am I going to ensure that my appointment still goes on and still goes forward? Or how will I communicate and troubleshoot that issue with my client to make sure that I'm still delivering those results? So those are things that you want to explore. You also want to have and show that you have a growth mindset, that you're continuously learning and that change is comfortable for you. Well, you know what I mean. And then digital communication tools are another key piece of remote learning. And when it comes to these digital communication skills, the good news is they're easy to build, they're easy to practice and to learn more about. These are the most common programs and tools that remote and flexible companies use for their teams. There are instant messenger programs like Slack, Google Chat, video conferencing, of course, we're all on Zoom today, GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar, Skype, file sharing with Google Drive or Dropbox, Microsoft as well, and Yammer, Sococo, and Microsoft Teams are virtual office environments. And so these are skills that you can build. A lot of these programs have free 2-week trials. They may have YouTube videos to show you how to manage or utilize these. One of the things that we recommend to our clients is when you are going through job postings and you're not sure how your technology skills add up, keep a list of these digital technology or digital communication tools that are mentioned in your job postings and tally them. So if you look at 10 different job postings and you see Slack mentioned 7 times and HipChat never mentioned, Google Drive mentioned in every one, but Microsoft OneDrive never mentioned, that is how you can prioritize which skills you want to learn first. Because it doesn't make sense if the types of jobs that you're targeting don't use Microsoft OneDrive for you to spend the time learning it, whereas understanding and knowing Google Drive is going to benefit you more. Enlist the help of your family and friends. Here we go back to networking. You can also use those family and friends to maybe help you or to do a Zoom meeting with you, get that set up and invite them to that to make sure that you have proficiency doing that, or Skype, or send them a document on Google Drive. So there are a lot of different things that you can do easily and pretty, really fairly pretty quickly to build these skills in a way that will allow you to show some proficiency when you apply for the job. All right. Okay. So in addition to the skills that we've already talked about, you can and should indicate any type of flexible or remote work that you've done previously on your resume. So as we transition into kind of talking through how to execute showing these things on your resume, the first thing you want to think about is, do you have previous remote or flexible work experience? Now, this does not need to be a formal setup. It could be casual, it could be informal, it could be working from home occasionally when your kids were on school break. It could be freelancing, it could be, sort of checking your email after hours, but managing those things from offsite. If you are able to think about, if somebody asked you in a job interview, what is your remote or flexible work experience like? If you could speak to your productivity and efficiency, your time management on any of these things, you can include it on your resume. And here's how you want to do that. If it's a position that is flexible, like a freelance position, right in the job title, you might say you are a marketing coordinator with a dash and the word freelance. If it's a remote job, there's a number of different ways you can do that, and we'll look at that in a second. That you might say remote in Dallas, Texas. So you're indicating the location of the company, but also that you worked remote. You could also include the word partial remote if it was not a remote job all of the time, but you eventually transitioned to remote, or that you work remotely partially a certain percentage of time. And again, if you don't have flexible experience, that's fine. We've already talked about the skills that you can show and highlight on your resume, as well as your technology know-how that can help you stand apart from other applicants for the same job. So as we go through, when you list your job titles and your job location, here are 3 examples of how you can list your remote work. You could say Western Governors University, which is the location or the company, and instead of putting a city location, it says fully remote. Underneath your title, you could put fully remote work. You could put it against or next to business consultant as well. And then finally, in the acting executive director, the third one down on the right-hand side under the dates, it says 20% remote, I believe, remote work. Yep, I had a box covering that in my Q&A box. All right, so this is what you can do with your job titles. Now, on the resume document, your resume should have a skills summary or a summary of qualifications at the top. Most companies are using applicant tracking systems to scan resumes that come through for job applications. You do need to tailor your resume every time you apply for a job for a specific job to match the keywords and skills. However, you also want to highlight those flexible and remote work skills very early on in your resume so an employer can see this. And these can be very easily updated for every job that you apply for to match the verbiage that a company uses. But in the first one, written and verbal communication skills, just like it said on the slide, that's one of the skills that remote and flexible employers are looking for. Then talking about how you did management and project managers on local or remote teams. So again, you're getting that keyword of remote in there and knowing to the employer, showing the employer that you have had some management of people who are off-site. In the second example, team effectiveness and productivity through communication. Communication is a big word. 6 years experience working remotely and in flexible environments. So you're really showing kind of the scope of the flexible and remote work that you did. And in the bottom example, skilled at team collaboration while working independently in remote environments. So again, calling out those strengths that you are able to be productive and successful on your own in a remote environment. Okay, so as we go back to touting our technology know-how, again, you want to show the technology tools and skills that you know. It's great to have a technology skills section on your resume as well if you don't already have one. And you can always add to this, of course, as you go through and build some of those other skills that we talked about, if that's one of the goals that you have for your job search. In the top section, it's kind of divided out into different categories. You can see remote communication tools, email, phone, video conferencing. In parentheses, this person specifically said which video conferencing tools he or she knows. And again, if these are mentioned specifically in the job posting, like Skype, and you know Skype, you want to get it on your resume in that way, so it matches the applicant tracking system. In the second example, effective when communicating remotely, over phone, email, and video chat. And then finally, in the last one, tools used for effective remote work. The tail end of that says new tools adopted on a regular basis. That's always a good thing to add. If we think back to the skills that remote employers like to know that employees have is the desire to continuously learn. So that kind of gets through and illustrates that ability right there. I sometimes, on the team, when we're working on resumes for clients, might say something like quickly and efficiently adopting new technologies for increased productivity and communication, or something like that. So there are different things that you can say to illustrate that you've been learning and are willing to learn new technology. Okay. All right, here we go. Action steps. Okay, so you want to do your research. What is available in your career field? What is being offered? What is realistic for you to do? What is your ideal flexible work arrangement that you are seeking? Identify your best remote-friendly skills and experiences. And then, of course, you want to update your application materials and your online profiles like LinkedIn to bring in some of these flexible and remote work skills in your About section so that employers who find you are able to see that you have those skills that are so desired from employers. Make sure you start interacting with your network, put together somewhat of a networking plan to execute in your job search, and then certainly you can look at and apply for remote jobs. So those of you that were here in the beginning, let's look at the chat box. And what is the first thing you're going to do to progress your 2021 job search as a result of the information that we talked about today? And I'll give you guys a second to think through that. Update LinkedIn, good, good. That is always a good thing to do. Update resume with remote experience and tech knowledge, perfect. Networking, more skills and keywords, adding those to your resume, I like it. Update LinkedIn, build a portfolio, great. Yes, for some jobs, a portfolio is almost always requested. Lots of networking, update resume for every job posting, very good. All right, you guys, excellent, that's great. All right, perfect. So before I dive in, thank you, assessing yourself for remote skills. Thank you guys, this is great. This is great. I hope you feel like you're leaving this webinar with some good action items that you can implement well to make forward progress. But let's now, before I dive into the questions, so I don't know if some of you are not FlexJobs members yet. I mentioned earlier in the webinar that we are a membership site. So if you use the promo code New Year, you can receive up to 50% off a FlexJobs membership. I believe this is going through the end of January. It's at least through January 10th. And so there will be a discounted rate depending on the service that you choose, 1 month for $14.95, 3 months, and a year. You can use the code New Year and get a discount, which is great. Okay, All right, so let's see how many questions and what questions that I can do. Let's see. What do you recommend? Okay, let's start here. What do you recommend for someone over retirement age who still needs to do a full-time job to survive? How do we get around the ageism at the virtual interview? All right, well, so first, before you get to the virtual interview, I do want to share this because I know this question has come up a lot today. Make sure that on your resume, you don't need to go back on your resume more than 10 or 15 years in work experience. And so make sure you're paring down that information. Don't include on your paper resume or on your resume document the date that you earned your degrees. That is not necessary. That can kind of help shield some of that before you get to the interview. When you go to the interview, and it's a virtual interview, obviously you want to do your best to have a background or an environment that is, clean, updated. Right before the webinar, actually, I'm stumbling on my words because I thought this was so interesting. There are some companies who are interviewing clients or potential employees right now who will provide you with a virtual background for your video interview, which I think is a really nice thing to do. It can help eliminate any bias that might creep into a hiring manager or a recruiter's mind based on what they see in the background. Because when you do a virtual interview, it's not just the person, yourself, where you're making a first impression, but it's also the space. Make sure that you exude or look, as energetic and enthusiastic as you should for the job that you are applying for. You want your energy to come across. You also want to make sure, as somebody who has a wealth of experience and background in, a career or a number of different careers, you bring a great perspective to many organizations. So use that as your strength. Those experiences that you've had, the things that you've learned, and now at this point in your life or at this point in your career, what you really want to focus on and do to contribute to the health of an organization and a team. So those are some things that I would consider doing as you're preparing for that type of interview. So hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for that question. Let's see, how to create the best opportunity to take a professional work history into a new career path with no specific experience. Okay, yeah, so career change is hard, it's scary, and sometimes it takes even longer than a traditional, job search. But I also encourage my clients who are going through a career change to kind of be excited about it in terms of the reality of it is your resume is a fluid document now. And every time you apply for a job, you need to tailor it to the specific job. When you're doing a career transition, you have to pull out those skills that are most transferable to that role. And so that's one way that you can do that and how you can approach it. Now, remember, I talked about networking a few times already in this webinar. What you can do is talk to people who are doing the work that you want to do and ask them this specific question. Sometimes, let's say off the top of my head, you're a teacher and you want to do some writing, and you obviously have done writing, curriculum, grading, papers, things like that, or whatever that is. Those are the things that you're going to want to pull out or ask somebody who is a writer doing the type of writing you're doing. How can I get from point A to point B? What would you recommend? Is there anyone else I can talk to? So informational interviews are a really useful tool to utilize when you're going through a career change or looking to go into a new career path, because you might find when you talk to some people doing these things that you think you want to do, it may not be exactly what you're looking for. And then you can kind of step back and reevaluate and then reattack based more on what it is that you're looking to do. All right, let's see, there's my arrow. Okay, how do you figure out the difference between companies who are doing remote just until COVID is under control and others who are good with remote fully? Now, typically, this is going to be company dependent, but companies should say in their job posting remote through pandemic or remote currently. On the FlexJobs site, if you're searching jobs, we actually have a filter that says remote during pandemic. So you'd be able to filter in that way. And those jobs you may assume would go back to being in person after the pandemic is under control. So that's one thing that you can do. I'm not sure how other job boards will do it, but companies should, for the most part, be indicating that in the job posting. Here's a great question. In my recent experience in exploring FlexJobs, though position is remote, they have a preferred location for applicants. I found that most for opportunities are in the U.S. and prefer somebody to be in the U.S. Yes, so this is not always intuitive. I actually learned this late in my remote job search myself. 95% of remote jobs do have a location requirement. So it's always best on FlexJobs to search with your zip code or your location. Or if you want a job that can be done anywhere in the world, to use the advanced search to search that way. That way, any jobs that are not available to you based on those parameters will be filtered out. Many companies will have these parameters because maybe they want people to come in for a regional meeting, or maybe they want you to live near an airport. I think most of the time companies have this requirement is because employers have to pay state taxes for employees depending on where they live. And I've lived in a number of different states, and sometimes I've paid state sales tax and sometimes I haven't. So it's just a matter of whether or not companies are set up to have remote employees in every single state. And a lot of them actually aren't. And so that's why it's important to look through and to do your research, or to use that filter so it filters out anything. So you don't spend time applying for jobs that wouldn't be available to you kind of based on where you live. All right. So somebody mentioned that they applied for a lot of remote positions and never got anywhere. So a couple things to note about the job search. It is very common for a job search to take 3 to 6 months or longer. It's common to apply to 10 to 15 jobs and only hear back from 1 or 2 companies, right around 8%. If you are not tailoring your resume and writing a cover letter specific for every job that you apply for, it's going to be harder for you to get momentum to get through those applicant tracking systems. If you are not networking and trying to connect with somebody at the company when you are applying for those jobs, that's another place to concentrate on because it can help you move forward more quickly in your job search. So those are some things that you really want to be thinking about. Of course, if we just go back to the last question I answered, if you applied for any remote jobs that were not in your area or had a geographic requirement, that may have an impact as well. If you, are not tailoring those documents and doing those types of things, then it's very uncommon, or it's very common to not hear back from employers and to not be contacted. Again, the response rate is about 8% to get an interview for each application that you submit. So there is somewhat of a quantity component to the job search as well. But if we circle back to all of the things that we talked about today about doing your research and really putting together a good action plan, you can be much more prepared to put together those quality applications every time you apply for a job. So good question. Thanks. Let's see. Are you finding remote flex jobs are offering benefits now? Oh, that question popped up. Someone must have ranked it. There we go, answering it live. That's company dependent. One of the things that we did see, and I just got this information before the webinar this afternoon, is that remote positions in 2020 were 20% higher than the listings in 2019. Depending on the company and the benefits that they offered prior to the pandemic or prior to offering the remote work, it really just depends. You can probably find out some information about the company on Glassdoor, about their benefits that they offer. Also on the FlexJobs site, when we have our company, the research database, where you can see a little bit about every company. You can also link directly to the company's website from there, and that might give you some additional information as well. All right. Okay, are cover letters a must? What is the best way to do a cover letter? Yes, we have a lot of resources on cover letters, and on the career coaching team, we do recommend that everybody does submit a cover letter for every job that you apply for. I will say that I personally haven't had, I don't know that any of the other career coaches have ever heard from a client that they like writing cover letters. Cover letters are tough, but here's the deal. When you apply to a job, you don't know if the hiring team is a hiring team or hiring manager that reads cover letters and will only look at a resume if a cover letter is attached. Because if you don't send a cover letter and you come across a hiring manager who won't look at a resume unless it has a cover letter, then you're, kind of damaging your chances for that particular role. The cover letter is also another opportunity for you to showcase your flexible skills, to showcase the experiences that you've had and how it transfers to the job that you are applying for. You can also take an opportunity in your cover letter to connect yourself to the organization or your desire to be a part of a company whose mission aligns with your personal mission or something about the company culture that really intrigues you. So a cover letter is an opportunity, and you can really, especially with a career change or a career transition, a cover letter can really help you make a lot of headway on your application. So good question there. Here we go. Let's see. Let me check the time. I've got a timer. We have a couple minutes left. So let's see if I can. Oh, so somebody actually commented that when they were hiring, they only talked to applicants who included a cover letter. See, there are people out there that don't read them at all, but then there are people who won't even consider an application without a cover letter. So again, that's why our advice is to write the cover letter. Let's see. My job of 20 years was eliminated 2 years ago. I had 2 surgeries that prevented me from working and then was offered a job in the beginning of the pandemic. As a result, my new job didn't happen because it was in the entertainment field and there were no jobs as a result of the pandemic. Now I'm unemployed. How do I reflect that in a resume or cover letter while applying for new jobs? Great question. I'm glad that somebody asked this. One of the things that you can do, and this is, 2 years for you, for other people, it might be 6 months, it might be a year. You can put an entry in your work experience section that says planned career break, professionally active career break, or career break. And you can word it however you want to word it, depending on what it is you've done over the last 2 years. In your particular case, I may include a bullet that says something like, well, I don't know, based on this question, if the surgeries were simultaneous with the position being eliminated, but one thing you could say is stepped out of the workforce to, let's see, you don't have to say that you had surgeries. You can word it in a way as though intentionally stepped out of the workforce to focus on health and wellness, excited and energized to return to work. If you did any professional development over the last 2 years while you were recovering, you could add a bullet that says, stayed professionally active by completing online courses in Google Drive, Microsoft Excel, and, public speaking or something like that. So having a placeholder for your career break and a brief bullet or explanation as to what the career break was for is also something that we find that hiring managers and recruiters appreciate so that they are not filling in the blanks for themselves. It gives you the opportunity to paint the picture for them so that they're not painting it for themselves. So hopefully that was helpful there. All right, let's see. Let's see if I can find one more. All right, here is 2 questions I saw right in a row about LinkedIn and how do you manage your LinkedIn profile when you keep changing your resume? Well, that's a great question, and it's not possible to always update your LinkedIn profile, specifically your experience section, for every time you apply for a job. Okay, so your LinkedIn profile and other online profiles are going to be more general and more broad. So make sure that you've got the most common skills and keywords for the types of jobs that you are applying for in your About section, on your LinkedIn profile, underneath your name. You don't have to just include one title like accountant. You can have a couple of different keywords there: accountant, bookkeeping, etc. And so you can make it more broad. In fact, you need to, because you can't tailor your profile for every job that you apply for. But when you are submitting your resume to a company, uploading it through the career page, you want to make sure you're matching the keywords and skills from the job posting, because they're likely using an applicant tracking system. So with that, I think that is the end of our time. I appreciate everybody here today. I appreciate the questions. I hope that it was helpful for you. Good luck to everybody. There are lots of resources on FlexJobs. If you are a FlexJobs member and would like to work with the career coaching team, there's all kinds of information on that as well. So thank you. Happy New Year, everybody. And we look forward to working with you as we go through 2021. All right, bye-bye.